So I'm putting forward a bold, ambitious plan on housing that is actually going to solve the housing crisis.
The Liberal Party has Canada for the last 10 years.
Sorry? For people that are supporting the other candidates, why should you be a second?
You know, at first I was kind of scared of Mark Carney, but I've come to realize that the more we let him talk, the more he's just destroying himself. Actually, I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment your thoughts down below. Give me a follow on other social media platforms as well. And we got a lot to talk about with Mr. Mark Carney today. Also, did Wayne Gretzky just save Canada? According to Donald Trump, we're going to dive into his latest tweets. Speaking of Trump, he just massively screwed over Mark Carney's wife and Gerald Butts, who, Gerald Butts, as we know, has been the string puller behind Justin Trudeau for many years now. The Epstein document updates. I also got a call from an MP, one of the shadow ministers on Poilievre's cabinet, while I was in the middle of filming this. So I asked if I could record the conversation. He said yes. So that is in the latter half of this video, ripping Mark Carney to shreds. But first, let's get into Donald Trump. He posted this last night on Truth Social, saying Wayne Gretzky is a fantastic guy. They call him the Great One, and he is. He could run for any political office, blah, 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 blah. But most importantly here, he says that Wayne is his friend and therefore has been very low-key about Canada remaining a separate country rather than becoming a cherished and beautiful 51st state. And he pretty much goes on to say that him and his wife, Wayne Gretzky and his wife, love Canada. They should support Canada and whatever else makes the Canadian people and Governor Justin Trudeau happy, saying that he is a free agent because he doesn't want anyone in Canada to say anything bad about him because he's still friends with Donald Trump amidst all of this stuff.
In the Liberal leadership race, but now the party's perceived frontrunner is being accused of not telling the truth. The opposition says Mark Carney is lying about his role in the relocation of the head office of a major Canadian company to the United States.
I will be completely frank, and I've said it here before. When Mark Carney first announced his plans to run for Liberal leadership, I was very scared because Mark Carney is Justin Trudeau, but 20 times worse and with a lot more money and a lot more power behind him to ensure that he is crowned. However, the more that he talks, the more I don't really feel scared, and it's actually just kind of entertaining at this point in time. I do believe that he will be crowned the winner of the Liberal leadership race. I think that decision was made a very long time ago. In fact, here's Karina Gould essentially saying exactly what conservatives have been saying forever, which is that they're all the same people. They're all a part of the same team. Every single one of these front runners in the Liberal leadership race, every single one of them is not going anywhere.
I'm going to invite every single one of those folks on the stage to be a part of my team. We need Mark Carney when it comes to the economy. We need Chrystia Freeland when it comes to foreign affairs. And we need Frank Baylis when it comes to health.
Obviously, intentionally omitting the fact that since 2020 and likely much further back, we just can't prove it, Mark Carney has already been in finance in the Canadian government as Justin Trudeau's advisor and as Chrystia Freeland's dear friend. But the more that Mark Carney speaks, the more that he just shows us exactly who he is, to the point where I'm not at all concerned. Narcissists and egomaniacs really do fool people for a long time, but eventually that arrogance of his, it is really starting to turn some people against him because he is just generally quite unlikable as a human being, on top of being incredibly unrelatable. He couldn't even answer what a grocery bill is for the average family in Quebec because he has no flippin' idea, right? Because he doesn't do his own shopping. And he doesn't go to the grocery store like anybody else does. But here's something, there's a couple lies from Mark Carney now that are being disproven, more than what that original CBC clip was about, which we discussed at length yesterday. If you want to watch that video, I will put the little thingy-mabob in the corner screen so that you can click on it if you want. But Mark Carney is very much tied to Ghislaine Maxwell through photos, which fair. Okay. Yeah. There's lots and lots of rich people, elite people, government leaders who have been photographed with Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew, Ghislaine Maxwell, and all of those people. So, that in and of itself is not direct evidence that he had any knowledge of what was going on. But the relationship that he had with her, he has said, was very minimal. He had no knowledge whatsoever of their crimes. He ran into Ghislaine a handful of times. No biggie, it was nothing. Unfortunately, the lie detector test has determined that that's probably not true because Ghislaine Maxwell and Mark Carney's sister-in-law were very good friends to the point where Ghislaine actually had like a spare room at his sister-in-law's manor. By the way, the fact that his sister-in-law has a manor just goes to show how unrelatable he is. But they were very, very close. And as we know, the Epstein documents have officially been released in their first wave. The way that they've done this, I actually don't agree with at all. And I think it puts a lot of people in danger, possibly, because what they did to release these files is they got some of the biggest conservative political commentators and people who have been talking about the Epstein case to come in. They got briefed at the White House and they left with a binder that had the first wave of information in it. And somebody published this just about an hour or so ago that shows that Tanis and Robin Rotherwick, which is Mark Carney's sister-in-law and her husband, Jeffrey Epstein, had 7 different home phone numbers to reach them at. That doesn't sound like somebody that you are not very well connected with at all, actually. So there's one lie there that I'm curious to see how that develops. And there have since been so many others that, for whatever reason, mainstream media seems to very much be omitting the truth and just completely disregarding any journalistic integrity that they should have to accurately question and press somebody who's going to be our prime minister. They're doing their darndest to protect him and shield him from any scrutiny where it would certainly be deserved, and where, if this were a conservative candidate, could you imagine if it was like Pierre Poilievre that happened to have ties to all of these people and ties to all of these ethics things? They would be ripping him apart. Mark Carney posted this tweet, or X post, whatever. He says, "It was my privilege to work with Paul Martin when he balanced the books and kept the books balanced." And Rick Perkins, who is an MP, we've seen him in the House many times. He is a very brilliant man. He said, "Carney lied when he claimed personal responsibility of helping Liberal Paul Martin balance the budget." He says, "Fact. Paul Martin was finance minister from late 1993 to 2002. Fact, Paul Martin balanced the budget in 1998. Fact, Mark Carney was a Wall Street raider working for Goldman Sachs from 1990 to 2003 in New York, London, Boston, and Toronto. Fact, he joined the Canadian Finance Department in late 2004, 2 years after Paul Martin ceased being finance minister. How did he help Paul Martin while he was out of the country working for Goldman's? Fact, Mark Carney lied on national TV to Canadians about his resume."
So when you're a frontrunner for leadership of the governing party, there are going to be lots of moments like this if you win. It's a bit of a test, as I think you suggested, for Carney. How is he addressing this?
Yeah, he has basically said this is a sign that Pierre Poilievre is frightened to death to run against Mark Carney, and that because Pierre Poilievre is a career politician, has no economic experience or business experience to speak of, they're trying to undermine and diminish the credentials of the central banker. He didn't really offer any other clarity on the timeline and why he answered the question the way he did. But the pushback from Mark Carney is that Pierre Poilievre is afraid of me. And I don't know if Pierre Poilievre is afraid of anybody right now, but certainly Mark Carney has been the singular focus of the Conservatives throughout this Liberal leadership race.
What is with all of these Liberal leadership contenders and their insistence and almost obsession with trying to make the public think that everybody is scared of them? Chrystia Freeland said it. She said, "Donald Trump is afraid of me." Karina Gould has said it. Now Mark Carney is saying it about Pierre Poilievre. Like, could it just be perhaps that people are poking holes in your stories because you're lying, therefore it's easy to figure out what the truth is, especially on the internet, and that they're calling you out on your lies because you are a liar and you suck, and people should know that information? Actually, oh, this is funny. So I had texted Rick Perkins earlier because I knew that I was going to be talking about that post in today's video, and in the middle of filming, he called me. So consider this an impromptu interview, I guess, with Rick Perkins. He is the Shadow Minister for Innovation, Science, and Industry in the Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre.
What is the price Liberals paid to keep NDP leader propping up this anti-worker government?
So he wasn't even anywhere near when Paul Martin, and Paul Martin balanced the budget in 1998. 1998, he was at Goldman Sachs in London and finishing his PhD at Oxford.
Wow. Like,
So-
is he, and you don't have to answer this per se, but do you just think that he is a compulsive liar, or are there perhaps some things that happened,
I think he's a compulsive liar and resume patter, and he's never been questioned under any intensity his entire career. So he's used to people lobbing these softball questions at him as bank governor because, oh God, he talks about monetary policy and quantitative easing and money supply, and I don't understand any of that. So he's used to getting puffball questions and never being pushed back.
Yeah.
And so it offends his massive ego that anyone pushes back.
Why is it that you can make time to fill out your security clearance papers but won't proactively disclose your corporate interests?
Because
But then why won't you proactively disclose your corporate assets?
just feel I'm in the middle of a leadership campaign. I will be subject to all the conflict of interest rules and the ethics rules. I will happily comply with all of them. It's a straightforward process. That will begin as soon as this process ends, if I'm selected as leader.
So, if you look at everything, whether or not it's what the stupidity of what he said on Brookfield, because he actually sent a letter to shareholders.
I know.
In December.
It's so embarrassing.
He actually sent a letter. How can he stand up and say, I had nothing to do with it? Oh, well, then why'd you sign this goddamn letter? Well, I've sort of you're questioning me. Well, I wasn't there when the shareholders made the decision. Well, that's not what you said.
Yeah.
You were very clear. You weren't there when the board made the decision. As a guy who served on 4,000 boards and is Mr. Corporate, he knows the difference between a board vote and a shareholder vote, particularly since he was chair of the board.
Yeah. Well, and then there's that letter too.
The meeting where the vote happens, and nothing goes on a board. I've served on boards. Nothing goes on a board agenda put forward by management unless the chairman agrees.
Yeah. So he's a compulsive liar and likely just thinks that everybody is stupid.
And padding his resume. I saved the economy. Look, the economy in Canada, 08, 09. Do you want to know what he did? Nothing.
Yeah.
He waited for the federal chairman to reduce interest rates, and then he follows, because Canada and the U.S. Canada always tries to maintain a set gap between U.S. and Canada U.S. and Canada interest rates so that the currency doesn't go crazy and out of whack and our dollar doesn't drop. So there were bailouts. There were big bailouts, but they were all done by Flaherty. The biggest, which nobody talks about, is CMHC, the Mortgage Housing Corporation. Flaherty went to CMHC and said, you have permission, the unlimited government bank account, to go and offer to buy any mortgage that you've insured with any bank in Canada. And CMHC bought tens and tens and tens of billions of mortgages from the banks, giving them cash from the taxpayer. And that was a direction by Harper and the government.
Yeah.
The Canadian banks also got bailout to tens of billions of dollars by the U.S. TARP program. That was the other bailout program because they were operating in the U.S. I was on the board of the BDC then, and we basically all the leasing business disappeared in Canada, so we got ordered to start the leasing business up. So we bought everybody's leases. If you had a vehicle lease with GM, we bought it. If you had, through G Capital, any leasing companies, the government BDC owned it. We took it over, and the government of Canada bought a massive amount of shares in GM with the United States government to give them cash and bail them out. So all of that was done. That's all fiscal policy. He had nothing to do with any of that.
Well, you know what's kind of interesting too is, and I don't even know why I think I was misled by the fake news a little bit because, the headline is, oh, Mark Carney, he saved Canada during the 2008 financial crisis. But if you actually think about it, no, a lot of that would have been Jim Flaherty, because he
the
was.
only thing he did was interest rates.
Yeah.
The rest was done by the government on fiscal policy, not monetary policy, on fiscal policy, bailing stuff out.
Yeah.
Whether it was through CMHC, whether it was through buying direct shares in companies, as they did with the auto sector, which was the main one that was being hit. All of that was the decision of Harper and Flaherty. Had nothing to do with him. He didn't bail the country out. All he did is move interest rates down a week after the Fed dropped their interest rate.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's so, I'm just curious for you. I can imagine for myself, just reading through this and researching, it is so frustrating, the way that things are spun, the way that words are used in a very manipulative way to leave you with a different impression.
Even the headlines, like I pushed back, as some of us did, like whether it was the Globe and Mail and the CBC, the headlines of all their stories were "Conservatives say Carney's lying." Well,
it's like, no.
They actually look at the documents that are in public and say, Carney's lying.
Yeah, period. Like it's so, and it's an omission intentionally to spin a narrative.
Andrew Coyne today puts out a tweet, and he's got Trump derangement syndrome. But he puts out a tweet on Carney's response on, or his campaign's response on whether or not he actually was the chair when this vote happened, and the campaign refused to give an answer. And he said, "Oh wow, this looks really bad on Carney. He can't do an explanation." He couldn't have written. I guess the Conservatives are right.
Yeah, I know, right?
He abandoned Canada when he went for most of his 13 years at Goldman Sachs. He abandoned Canada when he went to work for the Bank of England. He abandoned Canada by pushing his UN global agenda. It's just like the idea that this guy, so he says, I saved the economies in England, I saved the economy in Canada in 2008. It had nothing to do with it.
Well, and not to mention England is just in complete disarray.
I helped balance the budget with Paul Martin. You weren't even working for the government of Canada then.
Wow. That's so...
You weren't even in the country. You were in England. You were in London working for Goldman Sachs.
I can't believe that he says the things that he does. Like, I genuinely cannot believe it because it's so easy to fact check.
It is. It's just hubris.
It's kind of funny. One of the main topics of my episode today is how initially, because I've been familiar with Mark Carney for many, many years. I started studying the WEF and New World Order when I was quite young, and his name has popped up many times over the years. And so when it was first confirmed that he is in fact running, my thoughts were immediately fear because he's Justin Trudeau, but 30 times worse. And then,
and he's way left of Trudeau.
Oh yeah. And then though, the more that I hear him talk and do press conferences, and you see his demeanor and how aggressive he is without actually saying it, but you can just see it in his whole body language when he's pressed on things.
Well, I've seen so many things, but I think it was your clip I saw on X about his body language, about when he was how dare you ask me this?
Yeah.
Like, look who I am and look who you are. You're like, this is the arrogance of the guy, right, who hung around with castles and lords. Oh, we don't like your slogans. I'll spend less and invest more, which of course is a slogan.
Yeah, I know, right?
Which means invest more. What does that mean? It means you think the dental plan is somehow an investment that yields a financial return?
Yeah.
And so you're going to take it out of the budget? You think that, and that's what he's talking about, right? Like he's not talking about, look, the government has a capital budget and a balance sheet. And if the government builds a highway or owns a building, we own a lot, the federal government. If it owns a building and buys a building, that's on the balance sheet. It doesn't come out of the budget. It's an asset that you bought. You physically bought a building. Yes, you cannot call what's called program spending. You cannot call program spending like a dental care program or a lunch program or any of these other, nanny state programs that the Liberals have brought in.
Government dependency.
They are expenditures.
Yeah.
If it's not an asset, it's not an investment.
Yeah, you're just blowing through cash. Yeah, people all the time will say, oh, you don't care, you don't care. I'm like, no, I do care. I care so much that I don't want our government to spend like that so that people don't need to rely on services like that. That's how much I care.
Brian Mulroney used to say when he ran and became prime minister, you know what the best social program is? A job.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for your mental health, good for your life.
Good for your life, good for society, good for your family, and good for your pocketbook. And that's how you and your kids end up in a better place. Is a job. It isn't by going on welfare or a government program.
I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. There were a few other things I wanted to touch on in today's episode, but I will save those for tomorrow. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Subscribe to the channel. That would make my day certainly much brighter. Like the video, comment your thoughts down below, and as always, give me a follow on other social media platforms as well.